So here we are with week 14 of the 2023 NFL season, and already the playoff picture is going to be a complete clusterfuck by the end of this coming week that is to come. But before we get into our actual preview for this coming week, we have two final teams that are on their bye-bye vacation. And those teams are the Arizona Cardinals and the Washington Commanders. They took their vacation. They're late out of date one, and they'll be back next week where everybody is back on the grind. And there'll be no more vacations for all involved until those teams get on their offseason and everyone else will be in the playoffs. But now, that being said, let's get into the game slate for this coming weekend. And it all kicked off with Thursday Night Football, only on Amazon Prime Video, in, honestly, an interesting way. Because the Steelers defense made Bailey Zappi look like Tom Brady in the first half, as they allowed 21 first half points, and they tried to come back in the second half. Because, Mitch Trubisky is trying to play like an MVP in a good way. But then the bad side of the Nickelodeon valuable player showed up at the very last moment with some weird decisions, as the Patriots dealt a big blow to the Steelers' playoff hopes, as they managed to hold them off 21-18. And for those teams looking below the Steelers, this is your opportunity this weekend to try and snag that 5th seed from Pittsburgh. Woof. Woof if you're the Steelers right now. Now let's get into the actual slate of games that we have to preview. Starting with the Sunday slate in the early morning portion, as we have a kind of key NFC South matchup between the Tampa Bay Bucks at 5-7, taking on the 6-6 Atlanta Falcons, in a rematch from Week 7, where these two teams met in Tampa, as the Bucks beat the Falcons at home 16-13. So in terms of last week, both teams won their games in kind of ugly fashion. The Bucks beat the Panthers in an NFC South division game, while the Falcons beat the Jets in MetLife in a very ugly one. But nonetheless, a win is a win for both of these teams as they try to keep their playoff hopes alive through winning the division. And, if you're being honest with me, I don't really care for this game, because whoever wins this matchup is one step closer to clinching a division nobody wants to win. So I'm going to go with the Bucks here. I think they're going to sweep the season series with the Falcons, because they do have the slightly better offense, but not by much, thanks to Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans, keeping the team's slim playoff hopes alive. Then we have the LA Rams at 6-6 taking on the 9-3 Baltimore Ravens, who are coming off their bye from last week. And the last time we saw them against the Chargers in Week 12, they were kind of a little shaky without Mark Andrews, who is out with a season-ending injury, but they managed to slide by. They managed to hold off the LA back in Week 12. Meanwhile, for the LA Rams, they were in a tight one with the Browns until some mistakes by the skid marks allowed them to run away with the victory, as they try to make their own playoff push the rest of the way. And that was thanks to Matthew Stafford in the offense picking up some steam because of the reemergence of rookie receiver Puka Nacua, despite battling a rib injury. So for this game, I'm going with the Ravens. Hopefully that bye week helped the Ravens get in more sync, especially with that loaded receiver group with Rashad Bateman, Zay Flowers, Odell Beckham. Hopefully, Lamar Jackson takes advantage of that receiving core that they have. And hopefully he plays, because he didn't practice in their second practice of this week. So hopefully he'll be able to play on Sunday. Then in an NFC North matchup, the Detroit Lions at 9-3 take on the 4-8 Chicago Bears, who are also coming off their bye this week. And the last time we saw them in action, they actually managed to pull off a very ugly upset over the Minnesota Vikings back in Week 12. So, it doesn't mean much in essence for the Bears, who now hold possession of the number 1 overall pick thanks to the Patriots. So for the Bears, this is mainly focusing on, how competitive will Justin Fields and the Bears, how competitive will they be in terms of, now that you hold not only the number 1 overall pick, thanks to the Carolina Panthers, but also, what about your other regular pick in the top 5, in the top 10? That's something else to consider. Meanwhile, for the Lions, sure, you got the win over the Saints last week, but you were holding a 21-point lead, and your defense gave that up. That's not good at all, man. So against a crappy team like the Bears, this is a time to fix it. So I'm going with the Lions here, but you got to fix your defense here. The Indianapolis Colts at 7-5 take on the 6-6 Cincinnati Bengals in the first game that we're going to be talking about in the battle of the backups. But this is a critical game for both these teams because the Titans, they're coming. They lost this game against the Colts, by the way. But for the Colts, they actually managed to have a good performance against a Titans team that kept trying to fight back against them. So for both of these teams, they're coming in red hot. Their backups had some really good games. Gardner Minshew getting that game-winning touchdown drive with capping off with Michael Pittman Jr. And then Jake Browning surprisingly putting on a good performance against a suspect Jaguars defense. So very surprising performances for both teams. And for the Colts, though, they can inch closer to a suddenly tight AFC South race if they keep playing this way. I mean, it's suddenly closer because of the next game I'm going to be talking about. But for this game, I'm going with the Colts. So speaking of the AFC South race, the Jacksonville Jaguars at 8-4 take on the 7-5 Cleveland Browns. Another critical game in the AFC playoff picture because not only is it a battle of the backups, but also both of these teams are trying to keep their playoff hopes alive, especially the Jacksonville Jaguars, who not only lost that game to the Bengals in overtime, but they also lost their starting quarterback, Trevor Lawrence, in that game to an injury. But thankfully for the Jags, it wasn't a season-ending injury or anything like significant. I mean, it is a high ankle sprain, which is still kind of bad, but it's a week-to-week injury, and he did practice in a limited fashion this week. So that's the best case scenario for the Jaguars as they try to go through this stretch. Meanwhile, for the Browns, they're still trying to integrate Joe Flacco. Sure, he didn't have the best game against the Rams, and he had a lot of mistakes, but they're hoping at least, a full week of reps will allow him to do better. And they still have that one of those the top ranked defenses in the NFL. And considering that Trevor Lawrence is unlikely to play in this game against the Browns, I'll go with the Browns in this game. Then you have the Carolina Panthers at 1-11 taking on the 5-7 New Orleans Saints in an NFC South battle. And I mean, let's just be real here. I mean, I'm going to go with the Saints here. I mean, it's pretty easy to pick them, but at this rate, their division hopes are fading further and further, with Derek Carr just continuing to keep getting injured, man. I mean, he got concussed again. People were getting pissed about it. It just sucks, man. It just really sucks. So this is a rematch of their Week 2 meeting back in Carolina on that Monday night doubleheader. The Saints managed to win that one, and now they're trying to get the season sweep to keep their division hopes alive. So I'm going with the Saints in this one. The Houston Texans at 7-5 take on the 4-8 New York Jets. The Texans won a critical game in the AFC playoff picture last week against the Broncos, while the Jets lost to the Falcons in that very ugly game. The Texans, they had a good performance in that game. Will Anderson had a coming out party, and then Jimmy Ward, 49ers fans know him well. He got the game-winning interception off Russell Wilson. So they're hoping they'll repeat that game. But CJ Stroud might have a tough outing against that strong Jets defense. But it might not matter for the Jets because, well, guess who's back at the quarterback position, everybody? Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson is back at the quarterback position after the Jets released their quarterback that has started, 2 games? Tim Boyle. So it's like, why'd you just, demote Zach Wilson if you're just going to bring him back to the starting lineup anyway? What was the point of all that? So anyway, I'm going to go with the Texans in this game. Then we have the afternoon slate of games as the Minnesota Vikings at 6-6 take on the Las Vegas Raiders at 5-7. Both of these teams are coming off the bye weeks. And the last time both of these teams were in action, they lost their games. For the Vikings, they lost a very ugly duckling game to the Bears where Josh Dobbs threw 4 interceptions. No, that was not good for him. And the Raiders lost to the Chiefs back in Week 12. And they did pretty good in the first half, but things just fell apart in the second half. So both of these teams are trying to stay alive in their respective playoff hunts. The Vikings, they almost were going to bench Josh Dobbs. I mean, it's like, who else are we going to turn to at this point? For the Raiders, I mean, we'll see what happens, coming off that bye week, in terms of, how Aiden O'Connell's going to do, how their defense is going to do. It'll be interesting how that turns out. So I'm going to go with the Vikings in this game. And then we have the Seattle Seahawks at 6-6, taking on my San Francisco 49ers at 9-3. As always, I'll be talking more about this game in its own dedicated preview. But in terms of this video, this preview for the general league-wide recap, last week we saw the Seahawks lose a very tight battle against the Dallas Cowboys in a game that they really needed to win. Meanwhile, for my 49ers, they pounded the pudding out of the Philadelphia Eagles in Philadelphia to get some revenge, but more importantly, get themselves closer to hopefully getting that number 1 seed in the NFC if things go their way. So this is a rematch from, coincidentally, not too long ago, back on Thanksgiving, where the 49ers won that meeting in Seattle. So it's going to be an interesting one because, well, the 49ers are coming off a big dominant victory over the Philadelphia Eagles, and they're trying to avoid that letdown game. Pretty much like how it was several weeks ago against the Dallas Cowboys. And then the following week in Cleveland against the Skid Marks, they had a very letdown game. But in fairness, it was against a very good defense in the Browns. So for the 49ers, they got to avoid this letdown game against a Seahawks team that is going to be coming in very desperate because their playoff hopes are really fading fast, especially considering that the Rams are emerging in the playoff hunt. So I'm going to go with the Niners here in this game. So for the Buffalo Bills, they return from their bye week at 6-6, taking on the 8-4 Kansas City Chiefs. The Bills, last time they were in action, they could have won their game back in week 12, but unfortunately, they blew it against the Philadelphia Eagles. The Chiefs also blew their game against the Green Bay Packers in that Sunday night game in week 13. So the Bills at this rate, man, whatever they did during the bye week, well, they better hope it's going to be executed well because the schedule's going to get even harder and harder from here on out, and their playoff hopes are hanging by a thread. Meanwhile, for the Chiefs, sure, nope. I mean, they're going to be in the playoffs. I mean, but their problems on offense are just suddenly getting even more exposed at probably the worst time possible. I mean, just look at that Sunday night game against the Packers. Their receiver problem just continues to get more and more exposed as the bright shine brightest. With Taylor Swift in the house, with Simone Biles, with Liv Morgan, all in Lambeau Field, with your receivers dropping the ball. Oof, man. I mean, the Chiefs, I'm picking them to win the game, but it's like, you got to fix that receiver problem like real damn soon. The Denver Broncos at 6-6 take on the 5-7 LA Chargers. A key game for Denver here after coming off a kind of a letdown game in Houston with all the turnovers from Russell Wilson. So he needs to bounce back in this game against a vulnerable LA passing defense. Meanwhile, for Justin Herbert and the Chargers, there's still an opportunity there to try and make a last gasp at a playoff spot. But, I mean, man, did they put an ugly duckling showing in New England by only getting 6 points? Like, man, what the hell's that? So I'm going to go with the Broncos in this game. Then in the Sunday Night Football matchup for week number 14, it's a pretty big one. It's a pretty big rematch from week number 9, and that is the Philadelphia Eagles at 10-2 taking on the Dallas Cowboys at 9-3. And all of a sudden, after the beatdown that the 49ers put on the Philadelphia Eagles, after giving them their second loss of the season, things have suddenly become interesting in this game. Because if the Dallas Cowboys somehow manage to beat the Eagles at home, I mean, they are, like, I think the only undefeated team at home this season. Things could get really interesting in the NFC playoff race for that number 1 seed. I mean, you have the Niners at 3 losses. You have the Eagles at 3 losses. The Cowboys at 3 losses. I mean, if they all win their games this week, that race for the number 1 seed could become really interesting after this week. So for Philadelphia, they try to address their biggest weakness in adding linebacker Shaq Leonard, but we'll see if it's really enough. And then for the Cowboys, I mean, it's simple. I mean, you lost that game in Philadelphia because of the zany mistakes that you had in that matchup. So you're at home. You're in the comforts of AT&T Stadium. You're looking to avoid those same mistakes in the bright lights of Sunday night. So that being said, I'm rolling with the Cowboys in this game. And yes, that kind of is a disgusting thing to say, but I mean, hell, Fuck it. Now we have the Monday Night Football games. Yes, I said games. Week number 14 because it's the last Monday night doubleheader of the season, at least for Monday nights. There's one more in week 18, but that's Saturday, so that doesn't count. But nonetheless, we have the Monday night doubleheader for week number 14, and that is the Tennessee Titans, the first one. The Tennessee Titans at 4-8, taking on the Miami Dolphins at 9-3. Yeah, these two games are kind of unappetizing, but nonetheless, for the Titans, yeah, they really shot themselves in the foot in their game against the Indianapolis Colts because their special teams allowed 2 block punts that were very critical in that game, that turned the tide in that loss and allowed the Colts to stay in the game and pretty much cause a disaster for Tennessee. So they fired their special teams coach, and, well, we'll see where it goes from there. But Will Levis, he's still looking solid, though. Meanwhile, for Tua and the Dolphins, they're performing pretty well against, scrubs, as expected. So now it's all about strengthening that grip on the AFC's top seed before you have to go out on this tough 2-game stretch against the Dallas Cowboys and the Ravens, both a home and road split. So we'll see if they're able to avoid a letdown game against Tennessee, but I'm pretty sure they'll get the job done. So I'm going with the Dolphins in this game. And then in the final game of week number 14, the Green Bay Packers 6-6 take on the New York Giants at 4-8. So the Packers went on to beat the Chiefs, as I mentioned before, with everybody in the house. And then for the Giants, they were on their bye week, and the last time we saw them, they beat the Patriots in a uninteresting game. So for Jordan Love and the Packers, they have the easiest schedule remaining. They actually have a path to getting either the 6th or 7th seed in the NFC playoff picture. So they actually have a viable path to getting into the playoffs. I mean, look at their schedule. They have the Giants, the Bucks. Who else do they have? The Vikings. And then they finish their season in Chicago against Chicago at home. So, I mean, probably missing someone there, but nonetheless, their schedule is pretty winnable. Oh, yeah, Carolina. It's a very winnable schedule as long as they keep playing like they did against the Chiefs. So, you never know. You never know what gets with Jordan Love and the Packers, and that statement coming off that statement win against Kansas City. Meanwhile, for the Giants, I mean, you're basically looking at who's going to be on the team next year. But keep looking at this guy named Jalen Hyatt. He should be one of the focuses on that offense after he had a pretty flashy game in Week 12. So I'm going with the Packers here, but I mean, for the Giants, keep evaluating your guys. So that was all my picks. That is my preview for week number 14. A couple of interesting matchups that could shape up the playoff picture even further, even crazier, make it even more chaotic as we get deeper into the end of the NFL season. So it should be an interesting one this weekend. This is probably the one that could really make it a lot more significant, but let's say even more crazier. So let me know your picks. Let me know who you're going with, who you're going against. And yeah, let's start a conversation about this coming week in the NFL. Anyway, this is DylanLasagna signing out of another NFL weekly preview. And as always, keep that lasagna very cold in the fridge with your takes on the world of sports. And until next time, peace out.